Hello, welcome to Minimalist EDC. My name's Chris, and today is another new knife day. So I've been active on the knife swap subreddit, and I picked this guy up. So this one's not brand new, but it's new to me. And I actually picked this up from another YouTuber, 2G Flicks, who I will link their information down in the comments or in the description below. You should definitely check them out. Kind of a different take on EDC content, and it's rather funny. So give it a look. So this is the Giant Mouse Ace Nazca. If you watched a couple of my other recent videos, you'll see that I've had a little bit of a fascination with clip points, and this is very close to a clip point, as we'll see, but it kind of fits that same niche of what a clip point does. And so I've been wanting to incorporate more clip points into my carry to understand them better, what they can do for me, and what that type of knife shape is useful for. So let's get into it and take a look at this guy, shall we? So, as with most Ace packaging or Giant Mouse packaging, it's not terribly elaborate. We have a box. It will tell you the specs of it on the back. And then getting in here, this is the channel sticker from 2G Flicks. I'll put it up there. You should definitely check that out. We get a little warranty card and the knife itself. So this thing comes in two models. One, as you see, is the green micarta model, which appeals to me, and it also comes in a full titanium model. So this one base cost is about $220. I think the full tie one is closer to $250, maybe a little bit higher depending on where you get it. But I very much am a micarta person. I mean, I like titanium too, don't get me wrong, but this one is the one that appealed to me. So let's take a look at it together, shall we? Oh, that feels nice. So, it has a really, really good flicking action. I'm going to do that again. So I'm going to try the reverse flick. That's wonderful. Fantastic. So, as you can see, this is a crossbar lock, similar to the axis lock that you see on Benchmades. And so now that it is no longer a patented mechanism, we're seeing it on a lot more models. And to my knowledge, this is the first time that Giant Mouse has done it, and so I kind of wanted to give that a go. So, yeah. Okay, so just to get it out of the way, let's take a look at the size comparisons. So, against our American $2 bill, and then I'm going to actually show you the other clip points that I've been playing around with recently. So, this is the Bellamy from Vosteed. This is a Civivi Appalachian Drifter 2. And this is the Asher Douglas. And so we're all in kind of the same ballpark. The Appalachian Drifter 2 is a little bit smaller knife, but the rest of them, as you can see, have a similar ballpark as far as they go. And the clip points on them are all a bit different. So as you can see here, I'm going to try to show it in the camera. This does go down at a pretty steep angle. You might get away calling it a drop point. We'll talk about the blade shape here shortly, but the Bellamy is definitely that classic Bowie clip point. This one is a little bit more subtle, and this one is pretty classic clip point as well. But let's get back to the main attraction and talk about the Nazca. So what we're dealing with here is a Saber Grind, which is I think it's the only one I have in my collection that is a Saber Grind. It starts out pretty thick. As you can see, the blade stock on it is not very thin. Let's look at the Asher Douglas for comparison, which is actually kind of a thin and slicey knife, and you can see that it's starts out about twice as thick as the Douglas. It does get down to a decent edge here. I don't have my calipers handy to measure it, but it'll do some slicing. And so, one thing I noticed with the crossbar lock, it's tight, and I must mean that in a good way. So the Omega springs, which actually actuate this, have some real tension in them. So it's a deliberate action, I guess, to pull it down and actuate it. And one of the nice things about having a good tension in the Omega springs is it actually facilitates, the quote unquote detent of these things. There's no actual detent ball or anything, but what keeps this knife closed is the spring tension from those omega springs. So the thumb pressure you need to actuate this, like once you actually break that tension, it's going to fly out. So let's talk about the blade a little bit. So as you can see, the way that this thing is designed, it's all belly. Like from here to here, just nothing but belly, nothing but curves. And so this is going to be an amazing slicer. As far as the way I envisioned using this, it's almost like a chef's knife. Like you see the very similar type of geometry in a chef's knife. So once it's in hand like this, the blade is actually behind your knuckles, which it's not going to make push cuts difficult, but you are going to have to angle them a little bit differently. Versus like something like this, the blade is almost in line with your knuckles. This thing, it's going to swoop back. So it's going to make good if you're slicing through something. But what I think this thing is going to excel at is actually like working with it as a pinch grip, choking up on it, using it as a scraping mechanism, and also like almost like chopping food prep, because it's going to be able to rock, right? You're going to be able to use the whole belly on this thing to rock, and also to push through things if you were to working on small items where you needed to push through them and cut them. The jimping on the back of the blade, I'm actually a big fan of this, because as you can see, the jimping is kind of in a unique place. You don't see this on a whole lot of knives where it's way up here, but what jimping is for your finger to get grip on it, and this is where your finger sits. So if you were to put your thumb on it and push through it, or if you put your finger on the back of it to get a good grip to push down, it's exactly where you need it. That is phenomenal. And so the unique geometry of this thing is starting to stand out to me. So let's talk about its namesake, the Nazca. If you don't know, the Nazca is reference to the Nazca lions, which are in the southern deserts of Peru. So if you're going to name your knife after the Nazca lions, you better have some pretty interesting lions in the knife, and this doesn't disappoint. So the Danish madmen Vox and Anzo over at Giant Mouse have really distinct lines in their knives. It's very easy to see when you look at like an Ace Riv or some of their other stuff. You know that is a Vox Anzo design. You know that is a Giant Mouse knife. And so what we're looking at here is, so you see how on the back of it arcs up, and then this is a swoop, and then a swoop, and then down to the point. And on the underside of the knife, there's all these little indentations. So you see how this is cut out and then curves up, and into the blade. There's a lot going on here. As far as ergonomics, it's comfortable. Don't get me wrong. I could work with this for a long time without much of a hot spot. The one thing I kind of noticed that when I first picked it up is I want to choke up on it, and my finger wants to come up here, but this is a bit of a hot spot because it's pointy. So if I put my finger here, my finger's not in the path of the blade if I wanted to choke up, but it's not in a comfortable position. I actually have to choke back a little bit to get into a comfort zone. Initial impressions, I would kind of like to see from where the choil is here to actually cut this out and be a good place for your finger to sit if you wanted to choke up on this thing. But that's more of a nitpick and just a personal preference. Moving to the body of this, the micarta is well done. It feels good. It feels grippy. I think it'll patina very nicely. The body screws are not protruding. They don't feel like they're hot spots. We end up having a wire clip that's reversible, so lefties should be pretty easy to use this. The nice thing about this with a lefty, you have an ambidextrous lock bar, you have ambidextrous thumb studs, and this thing is swappable. So I think this would go very well in a lefty's hand. We end up with a brass backspacer with a lanyard hole, which not a huge fan of, but it is there. The liners If you can see, the liners are milled out with those holes in them, so we're going to reduce weight. The liners are pretty solid. Like I can tell this knife in hand is solid, and just messing around with it, like I believe I saw on the website, these are 440C hardened liners, so they are going to be good to go. Moving back to, because I'm having some thoughts about this, the backspacer here, and this is more of a thought on design and the trade-offs you get with design. So to have this backspacer here, to have this hole poked in the micarta, to have this lanyard point, what are the trade-offs? You can't have a deep carry clip, because if you look here, the clip, the farthest it can go back is right here. So this much is sticking out of your pocket, which is not the end of the world. This is not a war crime to have this much sticking out of your pocket. But if you were to have the micarta unmolested and the clip could go all the way back to here, this would be a true deep carry pocket clip, and that would be phenomenal. So just to give you an idea, so taking a look at some of the other knives I have on the table, this is the Appalachian Drifter. Here's how they implemented a lanyard hole. It's just a little unobtrusive thing underneath the liner that goes back in here. The Douglas, again, they executed a great deep carry clip. The lanyard attachment is hidden and it's back in that area. The Bellamy, they put the lanyard hole in the scale, but they did it in such a way where it wasn't blocking the clip from being a deep carry clip. I understand that they didn't have as much of the handle to work with here because of the way that this kind of comes back in the geometry of it, but poking a hole in the scale necessitated the clip to be pushed further up the scale, which for me is a negative. I don't use lanyards, never have, never will, and would love to have this thing be a clip that disappears in my pocket. But that's a nitpick more than a genuine complaint or I think it's a defect. I think the pivot's kind of gorgeous. It's polished, so it kind of like gleams with the rest of the knife. I think that's really neat. We end up with, I believe we got T8 hardware with T6 body screws. That's phenomenal. I don't mind that one bit. And we have decent lugs on the thumb stud. So we can see that here we actually have the ziggurat style thumb studs with a little bit of a cutout underneath, which I have not seen very much. Usually you just have the barrel spacer that goes all the way to the blade. So in practice, what that looks like is there's not a whole lot sticking above the scale, right? You have this little cutout right here that allows your thumb access to the thumb stud, but I don't have any issue with accessing it. It's good to go. As far as the Saber Grind goes, I think it's interesting. So you end up having a kind of a complex grind situation going on, which is pretty to look at. So you have the grind lines that come this way on the blade. I'm hoping the camera shows that, but the grind lines come vertical on the blade. But you also have a hand satin polish, or what it looks like to be a hand satin polish, that goes from here to here on the top of the blade, and then another polish line that goes this way. So in the light, you have three different angles or facets on the blade that actually cause light to catch it, and it's just kind of pretty. As far as the aesthetics of the blade, one thing I'm a big fan of is sterile blades, and there are no external markings on the front side. Kudos to them for that. On the back side, you have their logo. It says Ace M390. Not terrible. Not the best. It could have been up in this and be a little less obtrusive to be up here near the thumb stud, but no points docked for that. As far as the mechanics of it, I'm not having any issues. It's fairly easy to operate. It's responsive. There's a haptic feedback. The first time I opened it, I kind of noticed that it caught me a little bit, and so you can kind of see that right there. I've had other Axis locks that do this, not my Benchmades, but like other ones that are doing it. Because what I'll do is once I'm opening it and I'm closing it, I'll put the knife in the heel of it in the palm of my hand and pull down on the axis to have this thing guillotine down. Now, if there's not enough space between the bottom and the blade, something like that can happen. Not a big deal. I just have to adjust my grip to not get a little cut like that. So if I'm to adjust, I would just put it more like right here, and I'm not gonna end up nicking myself versus having the heel of the knife in the middle of my hand. I can just move it to the side of my palm. Not bad. The brass backspacer is a little scuffed actually, but I think it's attractive. Brass and green micarta always go well together. But so initial impressions, I'm kind of impressed with it. It's a little bit more stout of a knife than I thought. The thickness of the blade and the brass backspacer and the thicker liners, they all do add up to being a more substantial knife than I kind of thought from looking at it on the website. But I think I can get along with this guy. We're going to have it in the pocket. There'll be a disassembly video because I want to definitely see what this guy looks like and what makes it tick. I want to take a look at those Omega springs to see how different they are from the Benchmade ones. But this has been the Giant Mouse Ace Nazca. Thanks for hanging out with me. I would appreciate a like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this video. I thank you all and have a great day.